So Alton had a enlightenment guy staying with him for a while, and I looked into that guy's material on YouTube, and I didn't find anything especially interesting, but I do remember that the term he uses for enlightenment is persistent, non-symbolic, and then I think experience or something. But the interesting part of that to me was non-symbolic. I was noticing how my experiences have been, and basically I noticed that certain missteps in harmony with the way seem like you could categorize them as something like reasoning poorly due to abstraction. So for example, I might think about doing some writing work and feel quite unappealed to about the idea. So then I might reasonably say something like, I don't feel like working. And of course, technically speaking, the concept of work here is an abstraction. I'm thinking about not necessarily any specific task during the writing work. I'm rather thinking about whether I in general feel like engaging in that writing work. And what I'll find if I chop the abstraction down into real life pieces is I don't especially feel bad about going to get my computer or opening it or turning over to the writing page or clicking on a writing thing or starting the writing thing or continuing the writing thing or finishing the writing thing. There's no part of it that sounds necessarily unappealing. I do find the idea of doing the whole thing unappealing. And I think what happens is this sort of anti-sentiment of Christ when he said, take no thought for the morrow. Or you can think about this thing that says, you worry more, if you worry about things before they happen, you worry about them more than you have to. I think this is a Stoic thing. He who worries before there is trouble worries more. He who worries before it is necessary suffers more than is necessary. And it's like, look, imagine I have to work and I'm thinking about it and it feels bad and I do it and I have to force myself and it sucks. But now imagine I don't feel like working and then I just idly sort of point my attention in that direction and just accept that maybe I won't end up working. But then notice where my intuitions move me on a moment-by-moment basis, right? Well, I find myself eventually opening my computer, and that didn't feel bad, and I click on the thing, and that didn't feel bad, and I start, and that didn't feel bad, and I continue and finish, and it didn't feel bad, and it's like, interesting. This alternative approach allows me to do the whole thing without ever feeling more motivated to do the thing, without provoking any pain or gritting of teeth or willpower, without forcing anything. And I even don't have to stop feeling bad about work. If I feel bad about the abstraction of doing work, that's fine, but I simultaneously feel fine about standing up and getting the computer and starting and finishing. So here we see the non-symbolic thing. Supposedly there's something to do with enlightenment and not thinking in terms of symbols or something. And here I have a little piece of it. It's like people seem to decide whether to engage in something on the basis of its general abstract qualities. Do I currently feel like doing work? An even more abstract version of this is to be abstract about the self as well as the object and say, do I in general like doing work in general? And the answer might be no. And then that abstraction colors my experience of individual constituent elements of being me and relating to the idea of work. And it somehow seems very abstract and divorced from the reality of whether or not I feel bad about standing up and walking over to my laptop right now. There's a specific me rather than an abstract me. There's how I feel about things right now, as opposed to how I feel about things in general. And then there's not how I feel about work in general, but how I feel about the precise task before me if I were to engage in the abstract process of work. I do feel like I'm getting a different grokking, a deeper grokking of what it means for something to be abstract, which basically means for it to have, it's when you look only at the overlapping features of a thing and not the non-overlapping ones. But it seems like excessive abstract thinking leads to a neglect of the non-overlapping things that differentiate members of the word category from each other, and the exceptions, and how generalities about how work in general is often does apply to the constituent elements of the thing. And this is maybe an almost necessary effect of language because, well, it takes time to capture concepts and to articulate them and to communicate and reason about them. And it's like, look, if I figured out that I have this thing about work, next time I'm having the trouble, I'm going to just want to recycle my abstract conclusion. This is a general abstract work thing. It overlaps. And of course there's truth to that too, which is all of the reasons why this symbolic experience persists and is powerful to it. It may have a lot to do with our ability to interact with things that are like distant from us in a certain way. There does seem to be a higher variance thing going on with certain like Western strategies, and that by extrapolating out to the tail end and paying attention to principles as they apply to abstractions in order to deduce that they will continue to apply in unusual circumstances. It's an unreliable measure, but it does reliably generate possible, like, black swans. It allows us to munchkin reality. That's what science has done, is we've munchkin reality by ignoring the gists and getting really precise about the facts about things, and then noticing how we can exploit regularities to generate resources and wealth and so forth. And that's all fine, it's just that it also comes with disadvantages when there are false positives. And in fact, this abstract reasoning process is not helping us munchkin reality. Instead, and I don't know how to articulate this precisely yet, but instead it leads us to interact with things as if they were more like the central category, the central example in the category than they are. Like it gets us to treat penguins more like sparrows than they are. The concept of bird as an abstraction may cause us to err in treating penguins as more like sparrows, central examples of the category, than they really deserve to be treated. So it blurs out some of the nuances between central and non-central examples within the category. And then we employ the same copy-pasted low granularity strategies for dealing with the general abstract category of bird, rather than formulating a differentiated strategy according to the particulars of this very specific bird, which may or may not overlap even all that much with central examples of the category. Well, I guess that's basically it for now. These are my thoughts on the whole non-symbolic thing as related to enlightenment, and some of the like puzzle pieces or jelly beans relevant to what I expect will be some sort of derived principle about the common mistakes that occur while mistakenly applying symbolic thinking. So the same way that there's 100 ways to deviate from Bayes' theorem epistemically, there are 100 ways to deviate from, precise meeting of the situation And just as it was helpful for me to read a long list of cognitive errors, notice them in myself, ferret them out, become stronger, so it might be helpful to nail down a long list of examples of deviations from this sort of instrumental rationality, such that people may recognize them, ferret them out, and then by so doing, perceive the center more, and then become self-sufficiently something like reliable players within the dimension which is now apparent to them.